Unless you live right around here, you probably can't say exactly where this is. But if we go back to the same spot in early 2007, well, now you figure we must be right near Interstate 70 and Goodfellow.
It's a landmark. I've spoken to many people who will always say, as they're driving down I-70, when we get to that big building with the claw, we know we're almost to the city.
The industrial site here went by a number of names: the small arms plant, the ammunition plant, the ordnance plant, and it's been closed for years. The city owns it now and wants it redeveloped. That meant tearing down the old buildings, which have quite a story.
This is not a fireside chat on war. It is a talk on national security.
December 29, 1940, Franklin Delano Roosevelt is speaking to the nation on the radio. His fireside chats had started in the depths of the Depression, but now there was a different crisis. There was a war in Europe, and Nazi Germany was winning. It looked as if it was only a matter of time before Great Britain would be overrun. America's neutrality was only a technicality.
The people of Europe who are defending themselves do not ask us to do their fighting. They ask us for the implements of war, the planes, the tanks, the guns, the freighters, which will enable them to fight for their liberty and for our security. Emphatically, we must get these weapons to them. We must be the great arsenal of democracy.
The U.S. military buildup was already underway. Just a couple of weeks before this speech, the government awarded Western Cartridge Company of Alton a contract to build a new plant at Goodfellow and Bircher, and ordered $87 million worth of ammunition. Construction began in early 1941, and it would be just beginning production in December when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. The company had estimated its factory would employ 6,000. At its wartime peak, there were 35,000 people working here.
In 1942, I applied for the job, and I was assigned to Building 102, and I had a badge, my number 20177. The only reason I say that because I found this, otherwise I remember it.
Ed Wallner was 18 and the money was good, worth the long commute from the south side on a streetcar and 2 buses.
They left us off on Goodfellow, and we went through the security. We had our regular lunchbox. You opened that up. I'll tell you, the security there was fantastic.
His badge got him access to just one building, where he carried out just one small, repetitive step of the production process.
I had these lead slugs that I had to worry about because the armored piercing ones were in a different place. And you drop these into these hoppers, and it would go downstairs, and then they would be assembled with the jackets.
The .50 caliber cartridge is adopted as the modern standard for heavy machine gun fire and is the most effective of all small arms ammunition when employed against opposing aircraft.
They always told us that if this stuff isn't perfect, if you had a bad bullet, it might kill somebody that you might be responsible for, unbeknown to you. And this really, I don't know, it just had us working harder.
On land or in the air, your security depends on your ammunition. Use it properly, and it will serve you well.
There was, of course, quality control. Cartridges would be pulled randomly from the production lines and tested in another building.
There were many nights when I would fire as many as 5,000 rounds in one 8-hour shift.
Conservative political activist Phyllis Schlafly, a Washington University student at the time, was one of the many young people who went to work at the small arms plant and still has a memento from those days.
Well, that's a neat little thing that one of my boyfriends made me at that time. You can see it's the .30 caliber cartridge and 3 .30 caliber bullets, which he made for a decorative pin.
Her job was to help test the bullets for firing velocity, accuracy, and checked that tracer bullets worked, and that armor-piercing ammunition did, in fact, pierce armor.
And they had to go through an inch-thick piece of armor plate. As I remember, it paid $125 a month, and that was good money. I thought it was good money, and I needed a job, and I wanted a job at night so that I could go to college in the morning.
Women were being hired all over the city for jobs once considered men's work. There was so much war production going on, so many jobs that had to be filled, and so many young men going off to war. The small arms plant expanded to include a separate operation run by General Motors to produce howitzer shells, and women worked there too. Red Wallner remembers being impressed by the women he worked with at the small arms plant, and left behind when he joined the Navy.
The women that worked there, they were fantastic. They all wore their brown uniforms. They had husbands were in the service, their brother was in the service, their boyfriend was in the service, and they worked like we were winning the war by ourselves.
Well, we knew we were contributing to the war effort. Certainly they needed ammunition, no question about that. The small arms plant was the largest ammunition plant in the world.
But it wasn't just the Rosie the Riveters who were changing the look of the workforce during World War II. President Roosevelt, under pressure from civil rights activists who threatened a massive wartime demonstration at the White House, issued an executive order barring discrimination in defense hiring. Still, there were protest marches on some of St. Louis's big defense plants before the order was followed. It may not have been what President Roosevelt had in mind when he talked about the arsenal of democracy, but his words now seem to set the stage for a social as well as an industrial transformation.
And this can be accomplished only if we discard the notion of business as usual.
It is somewhat of a good part of our history in the sense that there was a diverse group of people working here.
Yeah, a lot of change went on here.
A lot of change went on here during that time period.
The small arms plant would be called back into service to produce on a smaller scale during the Korean and Vietnam Wars and ended production in 1969. The operation once covered 250 acres on both sides of Goodfellow. Today, some of it is still owned and used by the federal government. Other buildings are now in private hands and used for businesses. And one of the old concrete ammunition storage bunkers is today a church. The city obtained for redevelopment just 18 acres, but that included the distinctive building, which was part of the howitzer shell production. It housed the forges and furnaces, and the roof was designed to draw out the heat. You're hoping that that building is replaced by some big sign on a couple of...
We would love to see a sign for some big box retailer or a number of medium box retailers that could provide goods and services for this part of the city.
And so the old building at this prominent spot at Interstate 70 in Goodfellow finally came down after all these years to make room for something else. As time goes on, students will continue to study World War II, the leaders, and the battles. They may also find out that the war, in fact, was also won at places like this, in their own city. It's just that now they'll have to look a little harder for that story.